Welcome, everyone. It's a little bit of the voice of God in here, so I should always work in a room like this. I'm Michael Haley Goldman. I'm the Executive Director of New Hampshire Humanities, and I'm really pleased to see so many of you here, especially so many of you who contributed to this project. So those of you who have your handiwork in this, thank you so much for making this all happen. And I also do want to do a quick thank you to so many people who made today possible, including not only Eve, who you'll be hearing from and I'll be introducing properly in just a moment. We also worked with Martha Madsen on a lot of the project, and particularly on getting this into schools. Also thanks to Michael York and Mary Russell and the State Library for hosting us here in this space. I should also not ever forget the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is a project that was supported by the United We Stand program of the National Endowment for the Humanities, so thanks to them. And should also thank the Gilbert Lerner for the exhibition that you're seeing organization. That's something that they were able to bring here, so we appreciate them being part of this as well. I'll be talking a little bit more later on as the program advances. This is an exciting day. This is part of our 50th anniversary celebration, and the Knit Democracy Together program is an incredibly great example of the kind of projects that we bring to New Hampshire. So really exciting to have this as kind of the capstone of our 50th year. Introducing Eve is not easy because she's got a really interesting long background. Not only a former elections lawyer with 27 years at the Vermont Attorney General's office, working on election law and campaign finance and all kinds of other incredible things, and then suddenly turns around, or maybe that was happening all along, I don't know, to be a professional artist who's had work shown all over the United States, who has been in dozens of shows, and I love her description. It's art that raises serious questions with a soft voice. Her art has been featured in many, many different places, and this is only one example of that. In 2021, Eve was the National Arts, this is why I don't read, what? Strategies, National Arts Strategies. This is why you have to be here for the introduction. National Arts Strategies Fellow for New England. So this is somebody who's done an incredible amount of things and brings those two elements of her life together in this project. So without further ado, I give you Eve Jacobs-Carnahan.
Thank you, Michael. This sculpture of the New Hampshire State House was created by participants in the Knit Democracy Together project. I held knitting circles in 6 regions of the state, from the Seacoast to the White Mountains to the Monadnock region. At each gathering, I gave a presentation about some aspect of the electoral system. In addition, I visited middle school students and talked with them about town meeting, the role of the state legislature, and the voting process. While deepening understanding of the functioning of our democracy, we used an unlikely tool to break down barriers and strengthen connections, knitting needles. Why knitting? Because knitting is associated with care and comfort. The act of hand-making someone a hat or a sweater is an act of love. I believe a similar feeling motivated the people who knitted and crocheted the State House. They care about our country and our democracy. So as Michael said, this project grew out of 2 strands of my life. 6 years ago, after 27 years as an assistant attorney general for the state of Vermont, I left the practice of law to become an artist, something I had been doing a little bit on the side. As a lawyer, I had developed a specialty in election work that took me deep into constitutional issues around elections and campaigns. I saw many ways in which our system does not fulfill the promise of democratic representation for all. As an artist, I thought a public art project like this could demystify and strengthen our democracy. Preparing for my first Knit Democracy Together circle in March 2020, I had no idea how the world and our country were about to change. Needless to say, the arrival of the pandemic forced me to cancel the first knitting circle that March. But as it turned out, with the fear and alienation that followed, people craved connection. Knitting circles, albeit on Zoom, proved to be an antidote to the isolation people felt during the pandemic. Then another event impacted the project, the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2020. A little story will illustrate. Shortly after Thanksgiving 2020, I contacted a museum in Vermont to propose that they participate in the project. The program director was non-committal, but said she would talk it over with her director. I didn't hear anything for about a month, so on January 4th, I sent her an email to give her a nudge. 2 weeks later, I received a response. The violent attempt to disrupt the certification of the presidential election on January 6th caused the originally skeptical executive director to change his mind. The museum was now eager to hold a Knit Democracy Together circle. These circles do not exist in a vacuum. There's a history of women taking action through handcraft. Leading up to the American Revolution, the colonists boycotted British textiles, so colonial women went to work making homespun clothing. The Daughters of Liberty held parties and competitive events where women would spin, knit, and weave as the men patriotically cheered them on. In the mid-19th century, knitting circles were a place where women gathered to discuss issues of the day. Abolitionist societies, like the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society, knit fancy textiles, caps, and shawls to sell at fairs to raise money for abolitionist groups. The 1840 Abolitionist Fair in Massachusetts was so large it had to be held at Faneuil Hall, Boston. In 1917, the women of the New York City Women's Suffrage Party hired a hall and staged a demonstration to promote women's suffrage. They showed off their organizational skill by making 3,560 items of clothing for sailors on the USS Missouri. The suffragist Helen Hill told a news reporter that these women could get the job done easily, since these are the same women who helped get the signatures of more than 500,000 women of New York City who want to vote. In the knitting circles I held this spring, we talked about ways that the promise of universal suffrage for all citizens of voting age falls short. We learned how winner-take-all primaries exacerbate partisan divisions by producing candidates with extreme views. We discussed how gerrymandering distorts and dilutes the voting power of the electorate. And we talked about the Electoral College, a system that twice since the year 2000 has resulted in a president who failed to obtain a majority of the popular vote. But we did not leave it there. We talked about election practices used in various states that counteract these forces. They include Michigan's Citizen Redistricting Commission, Alaska's Top 4 primary, and the National Popular Vote Compact, which has been enacted in all of the New England states except New Hampshire. And we knit pieces of this collaborative sculpture of the New Hampshire State House. As we did, we modeled the representative democracy we wish to have. Each person who made a piece of the sculpture contributed a small piece to a larger whole. The sculpture itself is a metaphor for community representation in lawmaking. And it's no accident that we constructed a state capitol. State legislatures make critically important decisions that affect all of us. Decisions affecting our freedom, our schools, our health. State law sets the rules for voting by mail and voter IDs. State legislatures draw the boundary lines for U.S. congressional districts and for their own House and Senate districts, determining whether those districts will be politically competitive or distorted to guarantee results for the party in power. The people who attended these knitting circles love this country. They love their communities, and they love our democratic form of government. One of them even knit squares embellished with the sign language symbol for I love you, and you can see it if you look around on there. I want to read to you from a card I received from a participant in one of the online knitting circles I held at the start of the pandemic. This is what she wrote in April 2020. Thank you for including me in your Knit Democracy Together project. It has been nice to have a creative, concrete, yet small project to work on these past few days. There are so many ways I cannot control what goes on around me, in my community, my state, my country, the world. And there are so many ways I care deeply about outcomes over which I have no control. But sitting quietly, knitting one row after another, meditating on the nature of democracy, that has been a meditation worth having. A little bit of productivity I am responsible for. I hope that making a piece of this collaborative sculpture or attending this gathering today leads everyone here to more action. I hope you will be inspired to exercise some control over the world around you. Do you see the loose thread on the dome of the sculpture? It represents the weak parts of our democracy. Pulling on that thread could unravel the structure of our government and society. But there's a tapestry needle on the end of the thread. I urge you to pick up a metaphorical needle to mend our democracy. Take some time today to read the panels in this exhibition that tell the history of voting rights in the United States. Stay to watch the documentary about how young people 50 years ago secured the right to vote for 18-year-olds. Think about the topics we discussed in the knitting circles. Then choose how you will respond. What can you do to ensure we have a fully representative government, one where the people are sovereign and elected leaders respond to the wishes of the community? You have the power to strengthen democracy. Use the creative tools at your disposal, whatever they are. Just as each row of knitting builds on the one before, each of our actions, when added together, can have an impact. Thank you.